Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be a really cool video because this is a particular mold that I'm excited about. We designed this in response to the amount of customers we have in Hawaii who are buying our surfboard molds and things like that. We just came out with an American mold, or a USA mold, which is the entire continental United States. And we wanted to do something special for our friends in Hawaii. So we have actually developed a very large, it's hard to see in the video, but this is on a Hawaiian Islands mold. It's got all the main islands. Obviously there's a lot more smaller islands that wouldn't actually be big enough to show up on this mold, but this is our main islands of Hawaii surrounded by water. It's a two-tier mold. So you have a 1/4 inch thickness of island and then a 1/4 inch thickness of ocean. So you'll notice that if you're from Hawaii, you probably notice it looks a little bit weird. And that's because effectively when you're dealing with a mold, you're dealing with a mirror image. So once this flips over, it'll look more aligned and proportionate to what Hawaii looks like from space. So what we're going to do, and I want to say something cool about this mold, is that because it is a two-tier mold, you can either use it to cast the Hawaiian Islands and then demold them, you know, to attach to another resin piece or a clock or a cutting board or embed into resin or something completely different. You can literally just make the Hawaiian Islands and pop them out and forget about the rest of the mold. But what the intent of the mold is to cast the Hawaiian Islands and then cast the water and waves and whatever else you want around it. So that's what I'm going to do today, but I just wanted to specify that you can use this mold just to make the islands if you want to just have the island shapes for a different project. I've already used our MG Chemicals mold release, sprayed it on, and waited about 5 to 10 minutes. Always want to use a mold release with silicone molds, whether it's our molds or anybody else's. Especially with epoxy resin. Epoxy resin is really harsh on silicone. So using the molds will give you a longer life of your mold and prevent mold tear out. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm using a smooth cast color match 325. This is a urethane resin. I'm just going to use this for the islands. I'm only using urethane resin just for the sake of this video so I can physically get it done in an afternoon. Urethane resin set a lot quicker, so that's why I'm doing that. And I've got a little bit of white and a little bit of brown ink pigment effectively to make the islands. And these big islands won't be a problem, but the smaller teeny little islands here I've got a syringe for. So I have to work really fast with, or not just anyone has to work really fast with urethane resins. Because they set up so fast, and you definitely want to use a mask while doing this. The only reason I'm not wearing a mask right now is because I can't wear a mask and talk to you at the same time. Make sure I have enough here. This is a 2-part resin, and this is the color match stuff, so it looks a little bit kind of yellowy orange until you add your pigment. So now the clock is ticking because this typically only has like a 4-minute pot life. So I might not get the exact consistency and color I want, but again, for the purposes of this video, it would suffice. It will suffice. Yeah, like we're pretty dark. Pretty dark. Wasn't a lot of precision in doing this, and like I said, strictly because of this video, just doing it as a demo. Yeah, we're lightening it up a little bit here. So you've got like a medium to dark brown, and that's going to be our islands. And if I make a little bit of a mistake and it splatters on the rest, that's fine because I can just peel it off after it sets before I do the ocean. All right, here we go. I'm going to grab my syringe and suck up the resin to do the rest of the islands because they're quite a bit smaller. So far I'm impressed with myself, but oh my god, I was just about to toot my own horn and say how impressed I was with the lack of spilling outside the islands, and then I go and spray everywhere. All right. This stuff's already starting to set up. It's getting really thick and gooey. And that's the thing about urethane resins. It gets really hot, really thick, really quick. If that's about it, I'm not going to get anything more from that because it's starting to set up. All right, so I'm going to come back in literally 5 or 6 minutes and mix some regular epoxy resin in clear, do some waves, and then we'll go on to the final ocean layer. A few minutes has passed and the resin, the urethane resin for our islands is set. So I'm going to come and use just a general casting resin here to do the first layer of ocean and waves. Doing this first layer in clear will allow us to have some area where the waves can grab onto and set up in. And what's neat about that is that you'll also get some depth. So when you go and do the water, you know, the blue base, the waves will physically be above the water, which will be kind of cool. And again, like I said, you could take these islands out, demold them right now, and use them in a different project. Condense them, or just use specific islands. You can make keychains out of them, whatever. There's a lot of jewelry. There's a lot of uses for this mold, which is why I think it's kind of cool. It's a little bit plain once you look at it with the giant ocean, but I think that's, you know, where the resin artist's creativity comes in, whether you want to fill it with sand or seashells or, you know, just a lot of different wave textures and different levels of blue and green. I think that's where the final piece is going to pop, which is why this mold is really cool and why it has a lot of potential to make some nice pieces, I think. All right, so I've got our general epoxy mixed. I'm going to take some of it and pour it into here. And that's going to be the white I use for my waves. So I'm going to throw in some white pigment, liquid pigment. I've never used this white pigment before, this particular brand, so hoping it'll lace up nice with those waves, but we'll see, I guess. Okay, here's my first layer of clear. Don't want to go too deep, but I do want to get even coverage. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get my glove, just work that in. All right, just going to work this around to make sure that we get an even or relatively even base layer. It's only going to be as even as my table here in the warehouse. That's good. All right. All right, I've got a nice even layer of the clear base over this, probably about somewhere between a 16th and an 8th. And now I'm going to take my white resin that I've already dyed and my heat gun. We're going to make some waves, and we're going to start underneath the islands, blowing outwards. Hopefully my waves aren't too much. Pepper. Got our waves kind of around the island. As you can see, I've said this in previous videos, but this is not really my forte, doing this kind of resin art, and especially these waves. There are people that do this way, way better than I do. Just gonna put a few more lines of white resin, and then we're gonna blow them around. Now roughly 18 hours has passed since we finished pouring that layer, so this is still actually quite tacky. It's definitely not set yet, which is a good way, or rather a good time to pour the next layer, where it's not going to intermingle and mix with that, but it's going to have a nice bond when the whole thing fully sets. So I've gone ahead and mixed up some Ocean Baja Blue pigment into some epoxy, and I'm just going to pour it right in, right to the, pretty close to the top of the mold. Not all the way up there, but pretty close. And then tomorrow, late tomorrow rather, when this fully sets, we can demold it and see what this looks like. I think it'll be quite impressive. I think my waves probably need some work. I'm not a wave expert. There's a lot of resin artists that do lacing of waves way better than I do. But gave it a go. Let's see how it works. It's time for the big reveal here. The resin is fully set in our Hawaiian Islands mold. I'm going to peel the mold back. And there you go. See the nice raised islands. You got some waves and some cloud action, wave action, and some ocean that's transparent. It turned out pretty well. If you want to grab this mold, head over to craftedelements.com now. See you later.